Parents of summer school students in Detroit give us a glimpse of what school reopenings might look like. It's not pretty. We'll talk with Superintendent Nikolai Vitti. The Beaumont health system is being rocked by more than the pandemic. We'll talk about the turmoil with CEO John Fox. And we'll point to primary election day, now just 9 days away. Today is Sunday, July 26, 2020, and this is Flashpoint.
Hi, welcome to Flashpoint after a very turbulent week on a number of fronts, from an international showdown between the U.S. and China to the violence that is shedding so much blood in many American cities. So much of the turbulence traces back to the coronavirus pandemic, which is overtaking tempers, outlooks for the future, and lives. Consider Florida, where right now someone is dying of COVID-19 every 8 minutes. The return of baseball isn't really a return to normalization either. The empty stadiums just reminders of how dystopian our world has become. There are hopes that getting kids back in school might create some normalcy, but if summer school in Detroit is any indication, that's not going to be anything close to normal either. In a moment, Detroit Superintendent Nikolai Vitti will join me to talk about it. Also, you know that hospitals have been under intense pressure during the pandemic. At Beaumont Health System, the pressure has been amplified by plans for a merger and some nasty unrest that has doctors passing around a petition that declares no confidence in the system's leaders. One of those leaders, CEO John Fox, will join me in a moment to talk about whether the panic surrounding one of Southeast Michigan's most prestigious health institutions is warranted. And we continue our countdown to primary election day. It is a week from this Tuesday. The pandemic just blew a hole in the Republican National Convention. What does it do to the August 4th primary? We'll talk about it today on Flashpoint. Well, this week we saw parents blocking school buses, arrests being made, and this is just summer school in Detroit. What happens when the fall term begins? Let's talk about it with the superintendent of DPSCD schools, Dr. Nikolai Vitti. Dr. Vitti, good to have you back on Flashpoint again. I'm curious as to whether you think what we've been watching over these last couple of days is something that's sort of specific to summer school, or are we getting a look at the trouble that we're headed toward with opening up for the fall?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily specific to summer school. I believe that a lot of the concerns and issues that the protesters or even others in the community have signaled and expressed about face-to-face instruction is beyond summer and will move into the fall. But I think what is being ignored in the conversation is the fact that we're just meeting the needs of parents and students in Detroit. That's our responsibility as a school district, to meet parents and students where they are educationally. And if Novi is offering face-to-face instruction or e-course, so should we. In fact, if Novi is offering face-to-face instruction, it's even more reason why we have to do that in Detroit, because on average, our parents have greater needs and challenges than those parents in Novi or in other school districts. So this is never about a one-size-fits-all approach. We don't believe that school right now should just be about online or just face-to-face. And if we're going to do face-to-face, it has to look profoundly different than it did before. And it is. It is in the summer. It will in the fall. The board the finance committee approved $29 million in COVID-related safety equipment and procedures. And so it needs to look different. It will look different. But let's not forget about the voice of our parents that are asking for face-to-face and or online, and we have to provide both.
Well, in fact, what gets tricky here, Dr. Vitti, is the opposite, I guess, of one size fits all, which is everybody expecting, each individual household and family expecting something very specific to them, their own answers. I guess local control to the extreme, because isn't that part of the problem here? The vast experience and expectations of parents, students, and teachers is all over the place right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a factor. I think the broader issue is that we have a president that has not created an effective national strategy to contain COVID. And then when you bring that to the educational level, declaring that all schools should open without a safety plan, a funding plan, when school systems are already scrapped or in a difficult situation financially, strapped financially, then to ask to do more with less is problematic. But in Detroit, we received $80 million of Federal CARES Act that we can spend over the next 2 years. So we actually do have additional resources to spend on COVID-related expenses. COVID is not going away, as we know. The infection rate in Detroit is at 1 to 1.5%, which is lower than other large urban school districts in the country, and even areas in Michigan that's skyrocketing.
Yeah.
We believe at about 3% or lower is safe. We'll take the lead of the state government on that. But in the end, this has become, unfortunately, a political conversation, and one without the resources in a lot of different areas, and we're forgetting about children and families right now.
Well, we've had a judge, though, of course, that now has famously ordered that all the students attending summer school had to be tested. We've had some positive tests out of that, as we expected we would. We'll have more positive tests as we go forward. But is the district set up to test everybody who heads back to school, and how often do you feel like you have to do that?
Right. So 274 parents have tested at this point as of yesterday. We're having more testing today, but 2 out of 274 means that we're below the infection rate in the city.
Right.
But what it also shows that is after 2 weeks of summer school, we're not spreading it. So the 2 cases were in 2 different schools, 2 students that didn't even know each other in different communities. So the key is going to be the COVID safety strategies to prevent the spread into the future. But to your question, we thought about student testing going into the summer and even into the fall. We didn't know if we could scale the testing and it could be accessible, free. The city has stepped in wonderfully to help us with this group of testing. But as a school system, we're not likely to support student testing unless all Detroit charter schools test and possibly all Wayne County school districts test. That's a higher hurdle to jump. This judge's decision was completely out of bounds, not supported by any legal mandates. He just felt he was doing the right thing. But it also shows how far parents are willing to go to get face-to-face instruction, with more than half now agreeing to test, despite fears and concerns about the test itself. But at this point, the parents have not complained about the test, and students haven't complained either. It's a juvenile no swab, not as intrusive and intense as the adult one.
What do you say then to the parents who have been showing up at the bus yards, and how do you ease their fears?
Are you speaking to the protesters?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that not many of those protesters are DPS ED parents. Some are. But that doesn't make up the majority of the protesters. Most of the protesters have been agitators for years. I think they have brought up some legitimate points, but their position is that schools just should not open, and that's not a place of discussion, compromise. But more importantly, it's not a place that meets children and families where they are. If anyone knows our parents, they know that they need options. They need a school system that's nimble and flexible.
And I wanted to make
protesters are not thinking about those parents.
I wanted to make sure before we wrapped up that I got to one of those options. Do you feel like the online portion of this, should we end up having to go back to learning from home? Have we learned a lot from the last 3 months of the previous school year? Have we fixed that and made it better if that's where we end up having to go?
Yeah, I don't believe online learning will ever supersede face-to-face instruction. But I will say, as a system, we are much better prepared for online learning. All of our students will have devices. All of them will have internet access. We have a platform where all of our curriculum can be accessed online. Grading can be issued. Our teachers are going to be trained again this summer. So we're in a much better position to improve the quality, but I still think the option of face-to-face is important as long as it's healthy to do.
You bet. We will be talking to you again as we march toward the opening of school. Thank you so much for your time. Your work is awfully important, and we wish you all the best, Dr. Beatty.
Thank you.
You bet. Back with more in just a minute. We'll talk about some turmoil inside the Beaumont healthcare system. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.